The security rule was adopted to implement provisions of HIPAA. The rule is made up of three areas: administrative safeguards, physical safeguards, and technical safeguards. Each area encompasses standards which a covered entity, such as SRHD, must implement. It is important to remember that security is everyone's responsibility. You are responsible and will be held accountable for protecting PHI, following SRHD policies and procedures, and reporting incidents. Remember, if you see or hear something you know is not right, say something. If you accidentally click on something you don't think you should have, say something. And if you are unsure about any situation, ask questions. SRHD is required to take reasonable steps to limit the use or disclosure of and requests for protected health information to the minimum necessary to accomplish the intended purpose. Minimum necessary means if you do not need to know the information to perform your job, then you shouldn't have access to that information. The administrative safeguards comprise over half of the HIPAA security requirements. Those safeguards include security management process, assigned security responsibilities, workforce security, information access management, security awareness and training, security incident procedures, contingency plans, evaluations, business associate contracts, and other arrangements. We will explore these safeguards over the next several slides. There are 4 implementation specifications in the Security Management Process Standard: risk analysis, risk management, sanction policy, and information system activity review. In 2018, SRHD conducted a risk analysis and developed a risk management plan which describes the methods used during the risk analysis, what data was collected, the results of the data collected, and a 3-year work plan to address deficiencies. A sanctions policy defines appropriate and consistent consequences for employees who fail to comply with security policies and procedures. SRHD does not have a sanctions policy in place at this time. A draft policy and procedure are being developed and will be implemented sometime in the next year. The SRHD IS event logging and monitoring policy and procedure address how information system activities are reviewed. This standard requires SRHD to identify the security official who is responsible for the development and implementation of the policies and procedures required by the security rule. Patricia Rhodes is the HIPAA Privacy and Security Officer for SRHD. While Patricia is designated as having overall responsibility, others in the agency administer specific security responsibilities. For example, the maintenance manager and the HR manager supervise facility security, and the IS manager supervises network security. The Workforce Security Standard focuses on 3 addressable implementation specifications. Authorization and/or supervision is required to determine the proper access levels and to what locations a user needs access to. Workforce clearance procedures are required to ensure that employees have the appropriate access for their job functions. Termination procedures are required for when an employee, volunteer, intern, or vendor who once had access no longer needs access. This could be due to termination of employment or a change in position. These procedures can be found in the Security Access Policy. The Security Awareness and Training Standard focuses on 4 implementation specifications: security reminders, which are periodic security updates, such as the Cybersecurity Awareness Campaign; protection from malicious software, is addressed in the SRHD antivirus protection policy to ensure that antivirus software is installed and threats are reported immediately. The last two, login monitoring and password management, are addressed in the SRHD password policy and ensure that there are procedures for creating, changing, and safeguarding passwords, and that responsibility has been assigned to monitor login attempts and report discrepancies. Policies and procedures must be implemented to address security incidents at SRHD. Specifically, the HIPAA Privacy and Security Officer, or designee, needs to identify and respond to suspected or known security incidents, mitigate the effects, and document the outcome. A security incident could be anything from a lost device to discussing a client's PHI in a public area or with someone who does not need that information to do their job. In addition, incidents may need to be reported to other agencies because of universal, business associate, or data sharing agreements. Incidents will be covered more in depth in the breaches section of this training. The Contingency Plan Standard states that agencies must establish policies and procedures for responding to an emergency or other occurrence that damages systems. At SRHD, this standard is addressed by plans, policies, and procedures, such as the Continuity of Operations Plan, the Systems and Data Backup and Recovery Procedure, and the Testing and Revision Procedure. The last standard in the administrative safeguards is the business associate contracts and other arrangements. As described earlier, SRHD must enter into an agreement with individuals or entities that meet the definition of a business associate. The physical safeguards are another line of defense for protecting EPHI and include facility access controls, workstation use, workstation security, and device and media controls. Under this standard, SRHD must limit physical access to electronic information systems and facilities while ensuring that properly authorized access is allowed. Some examples of safeguards implemented at SRHD are background checks, identification badges, locks on office doors, doors with keycard controls, security guards, surveillance cameras, and equipment tags. There are many ways you can secure your physical surroundings, such as locking doors and file cabinets, avoid leaving sensitive documents on copiers, printers, or faxes, ensuring paper documents containing PHI are in a lockbox when they leave the building, and by putting lock boxes and electronic devices in the trunk or under the seat when left in your vehicle. A fundamental part of physical security is safeguarding PHI and ePHI at your workstation. Workstations in public areas should be positioned in such a way to minimize others' ability to see the screen. Those workstations should also use screen guards to protect confidential information. PCs, laptops, and tablets should be locked or turned off when not in use. Confidential and protected health information should not be stored on desks and should be hidden from view. Confidential and protected health information stored at your workstation must be kept in a locked drawer or file cabinet. Client waiting areas, hallways, and elevators are vulnerable areas, and therefore you should avoid having conversations with or about a client regarding their confidential or protected health information in these areas. Instead, use an office or conference room. Mailboxes can be another area where information is vulnerable. Use interoffice envelopes to ensure confidential or protected health information stays secure. Under this standard, SRHD is required to put into place how hardware and electronic devices are sanitized before reuse, and how ePHI, hardware, and electronic devices are disposed of. The Electronic Media Procurement and Disposition Policy describes how SRHD meets this standard. Technical safeguards contain the technology, policies, and procedures that protect EPHI and control access to it. Technical safeguards include access control, audit controls, integrity, person or entity authentication, and transmission security. SRHD must establish a balance between the identifiable risk to EPHI and the cost of various protective measures. 4 implementation specifications are associated with the Access Controls Standard: Unique User Identification, Emergency Access Procedure, Encryption and Decryption, and Automatic Logoff. At SRHD, a unique username and number are assigned to every employee, volunteer, intern, or vendor that has access to our network. SRHD has procedures in place for how client information is accessed during an emergency and how that information is encrypted. And finally, SRHD has implemented an automatic locking after 10 minutes of inactivity. This means if you have not been active on your computer, it will automatically lock after 10 minutes. The Audit Controls Standard requires SRHD to implement hardware, software, and procedural mechanisms that record and examine activity in information systems in order to determine if a security violation has occurred. In addition, SRHD is required to implement policies and procedures to protect EPHI from improper alteration and destruction to comply with the integrity standard. This standard requires SRHD to implement procedures to ensure that a person is in fact who they claim to be before allowing access. A covered entity may require a password or PIN code, or require a smart card, token, or key, or require biometrics, such as fingerprints, voice patterns, facial patterns, or iris patterns. At SRHD, users are required to use a password, PIN code, and where applicable, biometrics to authenticate their access. All users who have access to SRHD systems must follow the SRHD password policy. When creating a password, it must be complex and follow the SRHD password construction guidelines. Your password must include at least 15 characters, 1 capital and 1 lowercase letter, and a digit and a special character. To enhance security and prevent the loss of information, you must change your password every 90 days. SRHD Information Systems has enabled the security feature that automatically requires users to change their password. It is essential for you to keep your password secure. Ways you can secure your password are: never share your password with anyone, never write down or store your password in an unsecure location, and never use the same password for more than one application. IS will monitor system password usage and identify and report any patterns that suggest password policy and guidelines are not being followed. This information and more can be found in the SRHD password policy. The final standard in the Technical Safeguards section requires covered entities to implement technical security measures to guard against unauthorized access to EPHI that is being transmitted over an electronic communications network. Because emails, fax lines, and mobile devices are used to communicate, SRHD is required to implement policies and procedures to protect those transmissions. Electronic communications, unless encrypted, present a risk to confidential information. All users who utilize the SRHD exchange system must follow the SRHD electronic mail policy. When using email, confidential information must not be sent externally unless encryption is utilized. Users must not send PHI or PAI to internal recipients unless it is required in order to facilitate daily work and only to authorized recipients. Users must follow the SRHD electronic mail policy and the mobile device policy when sending, forwarding, or receiving confidential or sensitive information through mobile devices. Email messages and attachments sent or received in the SRHD system that concern the diagnosis, treatment, or payment for a client must be saved outside of the email system and made part of that individual's record. Faxing confidential information can be a secure means of data transmission. Always use a fax cover sheet when sending confidential information. Do not include any identifiable information on the cover sheet. In addition, you should always verify the fax number before you send it, confirm the fax was received by the recipient. When using pre-programmed fax numbers, verify and update on a regular basis or when notified of a change. Report any incidents to the HIPAA officer immediately. An incident can be when you send the fax to the wrong individual or when you receive a fax that was meant for another agency or division. Use of mobile devices is common practice and creates an environment of free-flowing information. We are accountable to our clients to use this ever-changing technology in a responsible manner. All users must follow the SRHD mobile device policy. A mobile device that accesses SRHD resources must have password or PIN code protection. No SRHD business information, confidential or otherwise, may be stored on a non-SRHD owned or managed device. SRHD employees may not use their personal cellular device to text for business purposes or store client information. For those SRHD employees that are issued SRHD-owned cellular devices, you may not text PHI unless it is part of an alternative communication request for a client. SRHD employees should use caution when storing client information and should verify that information on a regular basis. SRHD employees must not store PHI or PII on a USB device or flash drive.